the Daily Fantasy Edge. Peter Jennings, of course, go by CSUM88 across the daily fantasy industry, or known as the basement dweller in the four-man, coming in dead last yet again. Of course, joined by Adam Levitan and Al Zeidenfeld. Adam on the opposite side of the spectrum. All of the good things, winning the four-man yet again. Adam, I know you talked about it on the solo pod, but you have to be feeling good. Your magic number is 1 to clinch the four-man title for the season. Give us your update there and the news and notes on the podcast.
It's really a 3-man, right? Because one of us just gets DFL every week, so it's really just a 3-man between me, Al, and the listeners every week. Now, excited to be in a position to clinch the 4-man this week. Hopefully I can do that. More importantly, the listener league did not fill last week. 96 entries out of 10K. Embarrassing not to fill it. If you guys practice any sort of game selection, it is inconceivable not to play this tournament. Find the landing page, find the link, use the Google machine. Al has told you a million times how to do it. I've told you a million times how to do it. The Mans has told you a million times how to find the listener league. So get in there. It is 10K once again, even though it overlaid the good people at DraftKings, Al. They made it 10K once again. They ate like $1,500 worth of overlay, and they still brought it back despite the $1,500.
Well, God bless the fine folks at DraftKings in Boston, Massachusetts, USA, planet Earth. Good job, gentlemen. Now it's up to our listeners, and now that this video is on YouTube every week, our viewers to go out and fill it. It's ridiculous situation. As Adam said, if you're into any sort of game selection, if you're into any sort of bankroll management and you want to avoid a service fee, you should be in this tournament. Obviously the best tournament on DraftKings, best tournament on any site. You got to get in here on an every week basis into the listener league. As easy as typing DraftKings listener league. And it'll take you there. It's that easy. Just get in it.
Yeah. Into the Google machine they go.
Into the Google machine. Yeah, you can't just like type it on a typewriter from 1986.
There's also a big tournament on DraftKings, $1,500 buy-in this week, million to first. We should also shout out Chipotle Addict, who took down the $2 million for the live final last week, donating half of that money to charity. Really cool story in DFS. Great to see people turning their DFS knowledge into good for society. Adam, any final thoughts before we dive into the games?
Yeah, talked about Chipotle and the live final on the solo pod if you want to listen to that. In terms of this slate coming up, no Thursday game this week, so 12-game slate. But one note on this slate is like we're starting to get into the real dog days of the NFL here, right? So we have all these like motivation and injury situations, which we'll get to, Cam and Gurley and Aaron Rodgers and Christian McCaffrey and like all these other guys where it's not as clean as it once was for guys fighting through injury, for guys having motivation, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just something to like keep in mind from an overarching point of view on this slate, I think.
I just want to apologize to Chipotle Addict because these two yahoos keep calling him Chipotle. I'm assuming that they also pronounce it nuclear and simonin.
Say it one more time.
Route or route?
It's Chipotle Addict.
Chipotle. Okay.
Yeah, as in the restaurant or the spice.
Oh, believe me, I'm aware of the restaurant. I was going there every day until they gave everybody like I don't even know what they gave. E. coli. Yeah, I was eating it like every day.
Look, I don't want to get sued by any company that's out there.
This is the opposite of a podcast.
Last name is spelled Levitan, Levitan. All complaints should be emailed to him.
I didn't say anything not true. I was eating there every day. They had an E. coli breakout. Now I don't eat there. What do you want from me?
Once again, Levitan.
All right, enough nonsense. Let's get to the main slate. And Adam, I might have a chance to tie for the listener league if you will please just give out your lineup while we go through the games. Bengals at Browns is first. What are the news and notes here, Adam?
I feel almost bad for this Bengals team at this point. Obviously Andy Dalton went down, Tyler Eifert, Tyler Kroft, AJ Green, and now Tyler Boyd, who has played so well for them, looks unlikely to play with an MCL sprain. So yeah, we could talk about the guys who are going to replace him. I just have major concerns about the Bengals going on the road to a Browns team, which still has a shred of motivation left to try to get to the playoffs. A Browns team playing really well. A Browns team with a really talented defense. I have major concerns about Cincy's offense as a whole here. So whereas Mixon last week was home against Oakland, Boyd was playing really good spot. I'm a little bit more worried about Mixon here and everybody else on Cincy. I think the pretty clear cut to me best spot in this game belongs to Nick Chubb, who we've talked about Chubb a lot on here. We know Peter likes Chubb, generally speaking. But yeah, I mean, Nick Chubb's role is just awesome these days. I mean, almost a lock for 20 carries in this spot. And we've seen him get, 2, 3, 4 targets, even when they're not that far behind. Huge red zone roles. So Nick Chubb, to me, Al, is the premier play in this game. And the Cincy side has me worried.
I mean, a lot of people are talking about Baker Mayfield. Questions that I've been asked on stream this week. Everybody wanted to know about Baker Mayfield. Should they play him? I agree with Adam that if I'm going to play one of the Browns' offensive players, it's going to be Nick Chubb. I think that also Callaway at 3,900 is interesting, but I'm more interested in playing Callaway at 3,900 than Baker Mayfield at 6,100, mostly because of the group of quarterbacks that's around him in the pricing. Just makes it so that why would I want to pay 6,100 for Baker Mayfield with Andrew Luck at 6,200, with Matt Ryan at 6,100, Cousins at 6,000? The guys that are kind of sandwiched around him make him less viable to me. If he was 5,500, I'd be considering Baker Mayfield this week. And maybe I'm being too price sensitive. Quarterback, the pricing has been narrowed so that now we don't have somebody up at 7,800 like we used to, and then somebody all the way down at 4K. Pete, do you think I'm wrong for being that selective at the 6,000 to 6,200 range by kind of Xing out Baker Mayfield because of the guys around him, or should we be considering him this week?
Well, in tournaments, I think you can find justification for any of these players, given that they've made pricing so much more accurate on DraftKings. It really comes down to ownership in the tournaments. Obviously, that's been huge in the past, but I think, jamming in the highest equity plays has lost a little bit of value considering the pricing is so efficient, especially at the quarterback position. So Baker's definitely in play in tournaments, but for cash, I agree with you. I think there's far better options, and you really just have to pick the best guy. John Ross just can't stay healthy. This would be a dream scenario. I still think he's interesting. We'll see what happens with the injury report, but man, this Bengals team, like Adam said, has just been hit with the injury bug more so than any team, and hopefully they can get healthy for next year and provide a lot of fantasy goodness like we saw in the beginning. I don't really have any other thoughts here, Adam. I'm excited about the next game. Do you have any final thoughts here?
No, just on Baker. I mean, the way that he's played over the last 6-7 weeks is to spread the ball so widely across all of his targets. So in tournaments, it's like really hard to even pick who to play him with, because I think we could see 7 guys see 3+ targets, and that's not a recipe for success, I don't think.
I mean, on the Cincinnati side, are we talking about like maybe Cody Core starting, or Field Yates clone Alex Erickson, or maybe Josh Malone, who I assume runs really good post routes? Like, what are we thinking here in terms of the Cincinnati wideouts?
Yeah, so I like Auden Tate, but they haven't given him a chance. Josh Malone was a healthy scratch last week. They went with Core, Ross, and Erickson as their primary 3, but I don't know, man. I can't say I'd be interested in really playing any of these guys with Jeff Driscoll.
Yep. All right, let's move on to the next game, which sets up to be the ultimate flop lag spot that, Al famously coined. I love that saying.
I did not coin that. It's another statement that I did not make up.
Okay. Well, you coined it on this podcast. I'm still giving you credit for it. Buccaneers at Cowboys, Adam. Cowboys laid a total stinker last week. I played Gallup everywhere on DraftKings, which retroactively seems like a mistake, but now we have a dream scenario going against this Buccaneers defense, which you have pointed out is playing better, but on the road, they've been a much different defense, and the Cowboys coming back home, they need to win this game. What are the news and notes?
Yeah, I mean, I was confused by all the love for Dallas pass game last week, to be honest. We know about the man zone splits with Dak, and we also know about how, like, the week before, they had the dream spot home against the Eagles, and the game just turns wild, and then the next week having to go on the road to Indy, so... I don't know. I agree, though. This spot is far, far better. I'm a little concerned about how much better Tampa has played since making the defensive coordinator change. But still, I mean, I expect Ezekiel Elliott to be the most owned player on the slate by a wide margin, given the questions we now have around Gurley's knee, around the Panthers maybe not being as motivated. It's just going to push everyone onto Ezekiel Elliott as the safest running back at the high price range. So that's going to be a decision for people for sure. I could see Zeke getting upwards of 40, close to 50% owned would not shock me at all. From an injury perspective, Deshaun Jackson has a chance to actually return, which disappoints me because I know everyone's ready to give up on Chris Godwin. I'm not ready to give up on him. I know he's had back-to-back really bad games. One was in the rain against Baltimore. One, he caught one pass on 10 targets, which was a disaster. But yeah, I think there's some upside in the Tampa pass game here. And pretty clearly, Zeke is going to be the most owned. And, Amari and the pass game is at least in play. I think Amari remains a bit overpriced, but we've seen his ceiling, obviously.
So, can I just say that Ezekiel Elliott's my conviction play at this point? I'd be okay with that.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy just gets he gets 25 plus touches every single week. Since week 10, 180 touches, leads the league. Tampa Bay, worst red zone defense in the league. They allow a bottom 8 defense in terms of rush yards, yards per carry, and rushing touchdown percentage this year. What else do you need in terms of Ezekiel Elliott? What I'm concerned with is I think that I can play Dak Prescott with Ezekiel Elliott in this spot, if you so choose, most likely for tournaments, but I think he's cash game viable as well. Dak is a cash viable quarterback based on his price this week and in a good matchup, and Ezekiel Elliott's a guy that you're going to plug in. Now, with the amount of usage that Zeke has gotten in the passing game, a career high in targets and catches, and when you look at his game logs, look at how much usage he's gotten in the pass game as well, 8 targets, 13, 6, 8, 7. You're essentially getting a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 to pair with Dak Prescott. He has caught touchdowns as well over that period. So while the correlation matrix says that a QB1 and an RB1 don't mesh together, that encompasses every single running back, quarterback 1 combination ever. And some of them never catch the ball. Looking at you, Gus. Looking at you, LeGarrette Blount. But when you have somebody that's as involved in the pass game as Ezekiel Elliott is for the Cowboys, I don't mind a Dak-Zeke stack.
Yeah, I love it. And I do agree with you, Adam. I had questions about playing Zeke playing Dak last week. Ended up on him at the last second as a stack just because I was going for a correlated team and certainly think that was a legitimate mistake. I do think it's not quite as bad as the result. Amari Cooper has just been a massive boost to this offense. And Zeke Elliott has been so involved in the passing game that I thought, there is some pretty good upside. And the underrated thing about Dak, which makes me love him this week, is he has rushing touchdown equity. We've seen some of this read option stuff in the red zone. And like Al talked about, Tampa Bay has just given up so many touchdowns, worst red zone defense. I'm going to go back to Gallup in tournaments this week, certainly looking at Amari. I wish Deshaun Jackson was out because I would be running Godwin back, who I think is an awesome play if Deshaun Jackson misses. But in terms of running it back on the Tampa Bay side, if Deshaun Jackson plays, Adam, who would you look to in tournaments?
Yeah, it's tough. Obviously, the clear answer that most people would land on is Mike Evans. It's tough for me to give Mike Evans tough matchup and tough for me to give him more than 8 targets realistically. We've seen him go for a lot more, but with Deshaun Jackson there and Humphreys and Godwin and Brait, it's difficult for me to give him more than 8 targets, but Mike Evans is certainly a talented dude. I don't know, man. I'm not that opposed to running it back with Godwin still. You just have to realize that he's going to have to do it on less snaps and less targets.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the Vikings at Lions. What are the news and notes here, Adam?
Yeah, so the Lions are obviously dead. Matthew Stafford, I think, has been battling a more severe back issue than maybe he's let on for the last few weeks. And that concerns me here from that perspective. In terms of usage notes on the Minnesota side, which I think is where most people will be looking, Dalvin Cook, I thought was an awesome play last week. I ended up prioritizing him over Samuels, which maybe got lucky on there. But I mean, we saw Latavius Murray continue to be very involved. So now they go on the road to a Detroit team, which has shown vast improvement against the run and continue to struggle against the pass. I think Dalvin is a far worse play than he was last week home against Miami versus this week at Detroit, particularly when you factor in how much Latavius has played. I think the big question people have, Al, is this Minnesota pass game. I mean, Adam Thielen went from the most dependable wideout in the league to getting 2 targets last week. And I know Kirk Cousins only threw the ball 26 times or something, but still, it's concerning. But Detroit's been so bad against the pass. I think for tournaments, you could get Adam Thielen and Steph Diggs at really low ownership, considering how many game log watches there are there. And really, I don't think Adam Thielen's topped 13 DraftKings points in the last 3 weeks, and he's still 7,800. So that's going to be a tough pill for a lot of people to swallow.
Yeah, he's been around that range, 12.8, 13.8. 2 of the last 3 weeks has been Thielen. But like, as you said, he hasn't had that big breakout game. He was a 25 to 35 point guy for like the first 10 weeks of the season. And then all of a sudden this massive fall off. But things could be trending in his favor based on the matchup here, considering that Detroit was a team early in the season that you could run on. Then they trade for Snacks Harrison. Now all of a sudden they're a team you can't run on anymore. And teams have reacted appropriately, and they've gone from a team that you couldn't pass against, and now you have to try and pass the ball to move the ball up and down the field against them because you just can't run it. They're now the 10th worst defense versus QBs since the trade. They were 18th before that, and then the run defense went the other way. They were like the 3rd worst run defense before the trade for Snacks Harrison, and they're 9th best since that trade. So everything's kind of flip-flopped in the way that you have to attack the Lions. So I don't mind getting back on Thielen this week. I don't mind going with the American hero, Steph Diggs, or going with a Kirk Cousins stack. In fact, I think that that's the way to go in tournaments, is a single or a double stack with those two pass catchers along with Kirk Cousins. Looks like a very, very good way to build tournament lineups, especially because it's going to separate you from the standard roster construction, which looks like expensive running backs, cheap wide receivers.
Yeah. Dalvin Cook really sharp last week on DraftKings. Adam, who was the most heavily owned player across the industry, but on DraftKings he was priced up. And like you mentioned, Jalen Samuels was really popular. So that was a really nice pivot. I think he's still interesting just given his involvement in the passing game. I agree with you, Al. Since they've added Snacks, it's been hard to run on the Lions. But to me, the real value of Dalvin Cook now is that involvement in the screen game. The Vikings have struggled with their offensive line to run the ball really efficiently, and they've done a lot of different things to try to get their best players in space. I do think the receivers are interesting. Kenny Golladay, even against Xavier Rhodes, is really a good play to me as well. I know Stafford's been hurt, but he did it against Buffalo, which I thought was a really tough matchup. So there's some sneaky fantasy goodness, but the Lions at home, they've been playing slow, so it's not like a dream spot. Adam, any final thoughts here?
A quick final thought. One of the original founding fathers of team preseason, Zach Zenner, played ahead of LeGarrette Blount last week. So I don't know if I can pull the trigger on Zach Zenner, but just happy for the kid.
All right. Let's go to the Bills at Patriots. Big news, Josh Gordon. Looks like he's going to face another indefinite suspension. Brutal. I mean, it's great to see him on the field. He's an electric player, but man, the guy just can't stay right off the field. Mm-hmm. That certainly is going to impact this game. What are the news and notes outside of that and your thoughts on Josh Gordon, Adam?
Yeah, well, let's stay there. I mean, this role in the New England offense, this like perimeter wide receiver role, is not that like direct. It's not that voluminous. Like we see Josh Gordon have games with 4 targets. When Chris Hogan had this role before they got Josh Gordon, this was with Julian Edelman out. Chris Hogan played on 93% of the snaps and never topped 5 targets in a game. So the thing about Chris Hogan is he's 3,300. He's going to play every single snap in this game, most likely. And yeah, maybe they use Cordero Patterson. Maybe they use Philip Dorsett some. But I would expect Chris Hogan to play almost every snap in this game. He's playing with Tom Brady, and he's 3,300. That's the argument for him. The argument against him is I can't project him for more than 4 or 5 targets. He'll likely see a lot of Tre'Davious White. So from that perspective, it's a tough spot, but I can see the case for Chris Hogan. This obviously just happened a couple hours ago. I'm still kind of thinking through it. I don't know. What was your initial thought on the fallout of Josh Gordon, Al?
I don't think that when we look at what they've done since they've been this, complete operational battle station that they've had with Edelman back and Gronk back, it's not like I was expecting a ton of targets for Josh Gordon. He was more a weapon that allows them to have something on the outside. Same with Cordero Patterson. Same with Chris Hogan. Those guys are complementary pieces within the offense to guys like Edelman and Gronk and the 3 running backs. So, 4 if you add the fullback now, right? So, I wasn't really projecting to play any of the Patriots wide receivers. I still don't think that I'm going to have a massive share of any of them. But again, as you said, this is brand new news that just came out. I think it accentuates somebody like Edelman. I think it accentuates Gronk as well. Not really sure that I want to have a massive share. It's not like all of a sudden, Chris Hogan's going to get, as you said, Chris Hogan's going to get like 9 targets this week. We got to jump on Chris Hogan. That's really not what's going to happen. He might get 2. He might get 6. And there's as much of a chance of 2 as there is 6. So that's my issue.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. I mean, I think Hogan will get a bump in ownership. It was nice to see him finally catch a big pass last week. I don't love the spot. The guy that I think is interesting in tournaments, and I'm curious your guys' thoughts, is James White. I know they have everyone healthy and Burkhead's role is getting expanded, but to me, he's a really big upside guy that's going to come in really low owned. The downside is that Buffalo is going to have to get out to some sort of lead or keep this game close. So there's a really low floor for James White, but I think, as a guy who's going to come in 2, 3, 4%, he's at least interesting to me. Without Josh Gordon, maybe a couple extra targets for him. Maybe that's just optimistic thinking. The same could be said, I guess, about Sony Michel if you're going to play, hey, the Patriots are going to play well here. Sony Michel and the Pats D could make sense. Do you have a preference on the running backs, Adam?
Yeah, I prefer Sony Michel. I think that it's tough to see Josh Allen, and believe me, I love Josh Allen. I mean, this guy has the highest ADOT in the league. He's playing so aggressively. I love Robert Foster. Foster's Australian for sex. I love this way this Buffalo team is playing. However, going into New England, I think Belichick will be ready to combat a quarterback who's like Tim Tebow-esque, who is so inaccurate, who makes so many mistakes, who just tries to run with the football. I think Belichick will be ready for him, and that sets up well for Sony Michel. The problem with Sony Michel, as always on DraftKings, is he runs like literally 4 routes per game. So you're not going to get any catches most likely, but there's certainly double donk potential here for Sony Michel in terms of touchdowns. And yeah, I mean, James White's role is just like so auxiliary right now. It's tough for me to get excited about him.
Yeah. To me, the reason I brought him up is I like, an Allen, Foster, White stack. But
yeah,
I get what you're saying. I think it probably makes more sense. There's definitely more equity with Michel and the Pats D. Let's move to the Packers at Jets, Adam. Just came out, Aaron Rodgers is going to play in this game. What are the additional news and notes here?
Yeah, a little bit surprised, but Aaron Rodgers says he's healthy. Packers are eliminated, but he's still playing. He had a little bit of a groin issue. He's still playing. To me, that makes this game very, very interesting. I think there's way more plays here than people think. We can start with the running back situation for Green Bay, where Aaron Jones is done for the year. Currently, as we speak now, the Packers only have 2 running backs on their active roster. One is Jamal Williams. The other is Capri Bibbs, Colorado State's own Capri Bibbs, if I'm not mistaken. Jamal Williams, Capri Bibbs was signed on Monday. Like, we could see Jamal Williams literally play every snap. And I know he sucks. He has some ability in the pass game. He's shown before, and he can plod his way to 3.5 yards per carry. So I'm not excited about playing Jamal Williams, but from a volume perspective, I think he will be there. And I believe he's only 5,400 or so. The guy who I expect to be probably the most owned in this game, or one of them, is Robbie Anderson, 2016 board member of Team Preseason. Robbie Anderson has become Sam Darnold's favorite target by a wide margin, 29% target share in the 2 games since Sam Darnold has been back. And Robbie Anderson is just good, and this is a good matchup at home against the Packers defense, which starts a lot of rookies in the secondary. And Robbie Anderson's price, I was shocked. Somebody asked me to guess Robbie Anderson's price for this week before I had looked at it, and I said, I think 5,400 or 5,500, and he's 4,500, I believe. So, yeah, and then there's also, Al, I mean, I could keep going on guys in this game. Like Eli McGuire is only...
Please do.
Yeah, I mean, Eli McGuire is like 4,600, and he, badly outsnapped Trenton Cannon last week, and Eli McGuire's calling card is playing in the pass game, which sets up really well in this spot too. And then Randall Cobb's not going to play also, so we have all these other Green Bay guys. So there's a lot to chew on here. This is kind of the premier game for late season. Injuries could get a little nuts.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Darnold kind of looks like Syndrome from The Incredibles, and you could have him passing to another bad hair guy in Robbie Anderson. Good football player, really bad hair. And then Elijah as well. So the Packers defense has been not good. I'm going to be kind. They've just been not good. And the price savings that you get, you're getting a stack of a quarterback and a wide receiver in a good matchup for just over 9K. That allows you to stuff in. You could play Team Jam them in with that combo if you so chose to go that route. There's some other cheap quarterbacks on the list as well, but none with as good a matchup as Sammy Darnold has. And Darnold and the Jets offense have taken a big step forward. They're still not a good offense, but averaging 23 points per game over their last few, as opposed to 11 points per game over the few before that. So the offense taking a step forward, has a good matchup this week, and the prices haven't corrected to kind of catch up to that.
Yeah, tons of plays here. I'm happy you brought up McGuire. I think McGuire's a really talented player and the perfect type of back we want to target on DraftKings. Darnold call is interesting. You could play Darnold, McGuire, and Robbie Anderson and run it back with any of these Packers receivers. I do think there's a lot of upside in this game. The other thing that's interesting is maybe one of the defenses as well. More likely the Packers defense. I mean, Darnold's been great, but still prone to turning it over. Was a turnover machine in college and started off the year just giving away fantasy points to opposing defenses. So across the board, I think there's a ton of plays. Jamal Williams versus McGuire for you, Adam.
Oh, God. I mean, you saved 700 on McGuire, but I think Jamal Williams' role is more secure, and obviously quarterback play is better. I'm going to say Jamal Williams right now, but I don't know, man. I mean, we didn't even mention Devontae Adams, who I think projects to see as much, like him and DeAndre Hopkins led my projected volume leaders for this week in terms of targets. I mean, Devontae Adams has so many more targets inside the 10-yard line than anybody else in the league. We didn't mention Valdez-Scantling, who could line up in the slot ahead of with Cobb out. We didn't mention Kumaro and ESB. Like, there's a lot to like here, I think.
Yeah, basically play all the dudes, right, Al?
Well,
if we can call the Jets, if we can put the Jets on team dudes, I wouldn't really consider them the dudes this week. There are dudes that we should be playing, though.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Where do we draw the line on the dudes?
They're the dude facilitators. Darnold and Anderson allow you to play all the dudes. Let's just put it that way.
All right. Let's go to the Texans at Eagles. This game could be really nice, potentially. Obviously, Wentz is going to be out again, but the Texans playing amazing football now get to feast on this Eagles secondary. Adam, what are the news and notes here?
Yeah, I mean, I was driving around yesterday a little bit, and all the talk on talk radio is they should trade Wentz and start Nick Foles, make Nick Foles the franchise quarterback. You know, Nick Foles obviously won the Super Bowl last year and comes in, wins at the Rams, which was one of the biggest upsets we've seen in a while. I mean, 13.5-point dog winning on the road, pretty crazy. So yeah, I think one thing people are saying from a fantasy perspective is Nick Foles is throwing to Alshon Jeffrey at a way higher rate than Carson Wentz did, not throwing as much to Ertz, throwing way more to Alshon. And yeah, that's true. Somewhat of a smaller sample, but even last year, like Foles didn't target Ertz, 12, 13, 15 times like Wentz did. And maybe that's part of the Bible narrative, but I had my team of researchers look at this, and Foles is also a very religious man, also part of the Bible group. So I'm not going to blame the Bible narrative there. I will say this, though. Alshon Jeffrey's price did not adjust to how many targets he saw against the Rams. I'm not that excited about a player like Alshon Jeffrey, who has like no yak ability, but he's only 5,300, so I think that's at least interesting. And then yeah, as I just mentioned, I mean, on the Houston side, couldn't set it up better for Demaryius Thomas. I know he's expensive, but this Eagles secondary, as we saw like in the Dallas game, they can just get blown up at any time over the top. They're starting so many inexperienced, untalented guys back there. So Lamar Miller, I expect him to play, but he's banged up. So Demaryius, I think, is a pretty sweet play, even at cost.
And what about DeAndre Hopkins for tournaments at what, 8,600?
I meant to say, did I say Demaryius? I hate Demaryius. I meant to say, oh my God, I'm embarrassed now.
Demaryius Thomas. God.
Demaryius Thomas is
delete that. Producer Luke, redacted.
I was just waiting.
Oh my God. Producer Luke, help me.
Oh yeah, DeAndre Hopkins, the king. Why don't you bring up washed Demaryius Thomas?
Oh my God, I would never play this guy. When I watched the game on Saturday, I actually thought Demaryius Thomas was a tight end. I was like, who is that fat tight end? And then I realized it was Demaryius Thomas. No,
do you realize how many people's notes you just messed up? Because people sit there and take notes on this podcast, and they wrote, all right, Adam says Demaryius Thomas, and now they've got big squigglies. If you take notes on this podcast and you wrote Demaryius Thomas and had to cross it off, please post this on Twitter for us, because I'm sure that at least 7 of you did.
Oh, no, everything I've said, I meant DeAndre Hopkins, the GOAT. Sorry.
I agree with Hopkins. My question is, can we get this Houston Texans defense involved? Yes, they're on the road. Yes, Nick Foles is the greatest backup quarterback in the last 2 years in the league. I'm not going to say ever, but definitely in the last 2 seasons. He's the best backup quarterback in the league. Can we just go after this? As you said, Alshon Jeffrey gets peppered with more targets. They don't really utilize Ertz as much, or at least Foles doesn't utilize him as much as Wentz did, doesn't lean on him as much. The turnover possibility here and sack possibility here with Nick Foles at QB, I think is massive. And at 3,100, defenses we talk about how much quarterbacks have been truncated. The price band of quarterbacks is much more narrow now than it was before. How about the price band on defenses? We used to have defenses that were 43, 4,400 all the way down to 2K. The last couple of weeks, 3,400 last week, I believe, was the highest priced defense. And this week, 3,500. You've got the Texans coming in, who average 9 DraftKings points a game, are at 3,100 against a backup quarterback in this situation. Yes, I know it's on the road. And yes, I know Philly can pile on points when they're right. But are they right now?
I think it's interesting. I don't mind it, but I prefer just going with the offense on both sides. Big bounce back from Zach Ertz in this game. Alshon Jeffrey, like Adam mentioned, and then Hopkins, to me, is one of the strongest plays. And where does Deshaun Watson rank in terms of quarterbacks we want to leverage this week? A lot of upside with rushing as well. So I think there's just a ton of great plays in this game. Do you like the Texans defense, Adam?
I mean, they have one of the best front sevens in the league for sure. And as Al alluded to, Nick Foles is extremely immobile. There's a couple cheaper defenses that I think are in just amazing spots this week, and that'll lead to depressed ownership. But yeah, I mean, I think in tournaments, people should be spreading out their defense exposure if you're playing multiple lineups pretty significantly, probably more than they do, just because, you know, when it's so random when they get a special teams touchdown and stuff, like you need to be on it when that happens. So I don't know. Yeah, I think cheaper has more equity, but I could see it.
See, I don't like to do that. This leads itself. Maybe we're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but I think that our listeners would actually appreciate it. I like to focus on 4 or 5 defenses for my tournament exposure, right? And then I want to be overweight on the field on all 4 or 5 of those defenses is kind of how I approach going with tournaments. And you guys know how I go after defenses. I want ones that get a lot of pressure on the quarterback because I think that's the greatest predictor. And I guess studies have shown that is the greatest predictor of defensive scoring. When that happens, I want to capitalize as much as possible on those weeks. I think that spreading out to 10 or 12 different defenses and having just a few shares of each of them doesn't give you as good a chance to win a tournament as really focusing on 4 or 5 of them max and having 15 to 35% of those defenses. Because when they do go off, you're putting massive chunks of your lineups in a position to come in all the way up top.
Yeah, I think 4 to 5 is fine. I think when defenses, and I think there could be a couple this week that get up towards like 20%, then you might have a problem.
True.
But we'll see. It's so hard. I do ownership projection every week. It's so hard to project defense. I think I've been really good at a lot of the positions. It's just so hard to project defense ownership.
All right, well, let's keep it moving here. Definitely a couple other good games to get to, including the Falcons at Panthers. This was setting up to be a great game, but the big news here is Cam Newton is not going to play, Adam.
Yeah, this is one game that I'm watching really closely. Cam has been shut down with his shoulder issue. Ito Smith is going to miss this game. Christian McCaffrey has been playing 100% of the snaps for the last, month. I mean, it's just crazy. He was not in practice Thursday. Julio Jones did not practice Wednesday and Thursday. These are things for 2 teams that are drawing dead to the playoffs that I'm watching very closely. So this game could go from one that people like a lot to one that is just a total disaster very quickly. Taylor Heineke, I believe is how you pronounce it, will start for the Panthers, and he's like this 6-foot quarterback, former undrafted free agent out of Old Dominion. He's already been with 3 teams, I think, Minnesota, Houston, and now the Panthers. I doubt he'll push the ball downfield. Like even if McCaffrey does end up active in this game, it's hard for me to expect the same role, the same usage, and it's also hard for me to expect the same efficiency with Taylor Heineke. And then on the other side, I don't know if the Falcons are ready to give Tevin Coleman, like, hey, let's give Tevin Coleman 20 touches because Devonta Freeman's out and Ito Smith's out. They have this kid, Brian Hill, who played reasonably well in the preseason. They could just slide into the Ito role. I don't know if they're going to do that or not. That's a question. So many questions around this game, Al. To me, this is like the poster game for teams are dead, evaluation mode, be careful.
Yeah, I mean, at first glance, I was like, I don't believe that Christian McCaffrey is going to see a role change with a change in quarterback because, you could argue that Cam Newton hasn't played for 3 weeks and his role has basically been the same, but still defenses have to respect the fact that Cam is Cam, even though he couldn't make those same throws. I still think again, we're going to have to monitor practice reports from Friday. We're going to have to monitor news. We're going to have to monitor everything else. But assuming that Christian McCaffrey still sees his 6 to 8 targets and still sees his 12 to 15 carries a game, I'm fine with Christian McCaffrey in this spot. Am I a little bit more nervous about it with Heineke out there? Obviously, the totals come down 7 points. The line has shifted 7 points from, the Panthers being 3.5 point favorites to being 3.5 point dogs, and 7 points off the total means that they're just expecting 7 less points for the Panthers offense. So yeah, is the scoring expectation down? Yes. Is the touchdown expectation down? Yes. But is Christian McCaffrey somebody that can get you there on volume alone? Also, yes. So if he is going to play 90+% of the snaps again this week, I'm probably not going to shy away from him in tournaments.
Yeah, this is a big spot to watch with the news. Julio Jones not practicing again Thursday as we're recording this. I assume he's going to be fine. You mentioned Tevin Coleman, who finally paid off. Also had a 40-yard touchdown called back on kind of a BS. I believe it was a block in the back. So Tevin Coleman could have had the monster eruption game that I've been waiting for all year. I really blame the Falcons offensive line for him not being more successful. And yeah, this whole Panthers situation is very, very hard to figure out, given they're shutting Cam down, and both teams have no incentive. They have incentive to lose, actually. So very tricky spot, one to monitor throughout the week. Definitely check all the weekend notes, guys. Let's go to the Giants at Colts, and we have some other big news and notes we're waiting on here too, Adam.
Yeah, Odell Beckham not practicing once again on Thursday for the Giants. I mean, at this point, I'd be surprised. They desperately need to lose games. They need to put themselves in a position to draft a quarterback, and they need to lose games. So no reason for Odell to force it. We know when Odell is out, I mean, Sterling Shepard is just total dust. He plays outside more. The way he's used, he needs like 12 targets to get there. And I know people keep playing Sterling Shepard and they keep getting frustrated. I think it's just the type of play, as I talked about in the solo pod, that we just don't want to be making, even if it does work out and he gets a ton of targets. The guy that is more exciting on the Giants side is obviously, well, we'll get to one who's obvious, but Evan Ingram, since getting healthy, last week ran a route on almost all, I think it was like 80% of Eli Manning's dropbacks. And as we saw last year when Odell was out, I mean, Evan Ingram is one of the more talented pass catching tight ends in the league. I wish he was cheaper. His price has gone up to $4,600, but we just don't get like this kind of upside at the tight end position below 5K that often. So I think Evan Ingram is in play. And then, Al, we have, the most confusing price situation. I know we talked about it earlier in the week. Saquon Barkley was 9,400 against the Titans. He has a bad game, it happens. And now he goes down to 7,900. 1,500 to take off Saquon Barkley's price to me is crazy. And I think that's going to inflate his ownership a lot.
I mean, it went down to 7,900 against Chicago, but that's the Bears. I honestly don't understand why it came down as much as it did. The guy's had one game that's been sub double digits on the entire season, and it was, last week, but does that mean that he should have been dropped to 7,900? I know that DraftKings has been very aggressive about pricing down players against tough defenses versus a position, or tough defenses overall. And at first glance, you're like, well, Indy has been kind of tough against opposing running backs, but they kind of also haven't. They're allowing 25.66 points per game to opposing running backs. Now, yeah, that's collective for entire team running backs, but they're also second in the league. As much as we are chomping at the bit week after week to play running backs against the Atlanta Falcons, who allow 9.14 targets per game to opposing running backs and 7.57 catches. Do you know who's second in the league in both of those categories? The Indianapolis Colts, who allow 9.07 targets per game, so 0.07 less targets and 7.14 catches a game. Guess who's a good pass catching running back, Pete?
Saquon Barkley is decent.
Yeah.
He's pretty good at catching the football, pretty good at running after the catch. I got a play for you guys that I think is a potential millionaire maker winner, which I need to get even on DraftKings this year. How about Marlon Mack on the other side, who's getting ridiculous usage? Adam, you tweeted about him. He was one of the guys I was highest on coming into the year. Great quote from Andrew Luck to start the season when they were struggling. He said they desperately need Marlon Mack back, and you've seen it in the red zone. He's been extremely efficient. He has great burst, and his involvement in the passing game isn't great because they have guys like Naheem Hines, who's an amazing pass-catching back, but he can still get a couple targets. I think he is a very strong play who's going to be very under-owned. I think people are going to save money and go down to Coleman, McGuire, even Jamal Williams in the same price range, 5,400 versus 5,500, will soak up ownership. So to me, he's one of those contrarian plays. I agree with you, Al. Saquon Barkley looks like just a jam him in play, along with Ezekiel Elliott. Adam, you tweeted some stuff about Mac. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, kind of the point of the tweet was that Marlon Mack does not have the kind of role that a lot of these other running backs have, where they're out there every snap, they're involved in the pass game. But when the Colts run the football, it is Marlon Mack. So like a target projection on Marlon Mack is literally like 1 or 2, and it's tough for me to get excited about.
I'll take over 1. I'll take over 1.
What about 2? Do you want over 2?
Nah, I don't think I want over 2.
Okay.
So 2's the limit.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard.
I think I'll take over 1. I mean, I know last week he, it's weird.
Last 3 weeks he's had 1 target.
Yeah.
I mean,
and he had 3 weeks of 2 before that, 4, 3. So I think 1.5, 2 targets is kind of where he's going to live.
Right, and it's hard to find a ceiling on DraftKings. Like you need touchdowns, you need the 100-yard bonus, right? Like that's what you need if you're not going to get any targets. So yeah, I mean, Marlon Mack got it last week. That's great. He certainly has a good chance to do it again, to score touchdowns and go over 100 yards again. This week against the Giants, it's just not the kind of player that I normally like to play. But yeah, Marlon Mack's not incapable as a pass catcher. Like he can actually do it. They just don't use him that way because Nyheim Hines is there and he's better. Speaking of the Indy side, though, Al, which we haven't even gotten to, I mean, I don't know what they're doing with Andrew Luck's price either. All the dude does is go out there and throw touchdowns, put up yards. I know they didn't need him to do it last week because they won like 23-0. Yeah. But, I mean, if you think the Giants can put up any fight here, Andrew Luck will be forcing them more volume. I think T.Y. Hilton will be healthier, ankle and shoulder issues. And Hilton's price, we talked about it like 3 straight weeks. This guy has as much talent and big playability and volume as anybody in the league, yet he's down at like 7,100. He's been in the 6Ks for a while. So, I mean, all these guys, I think, are interesting. And going back to Ebron, I don't think is the worst thing in the world either.
Yeah, I think Ebron's the flop lag spot in this. You know, everybody was on him last week, and then he didn't do well, and then he missed Wednesday's practice. But it's week 16, guys, and anybody who's been in the league for like over 5 years misses Wednesday practice every single week. That's not news. When they miss Friday practice, that's when you can, my ears perk up. Thursday, my ears perk up a little bit, but like missing Friday practice, that's the big one. Wednesday, I really kind of don't care at this point in the season. So, oh my God, he didn't practice on Wednesday. Who the hell cares? It's Wednesday. They're veterans. They know what the hell they're doing. They spend the day in the training room and in film. So Eric Ebron, really good spot here for me in terms of bounce back. My issue with Marlon Mack is that I think that this is a whack-a-mole spot. And even though it's a really good matchup and at home and in a game that they could win by a lot, that's the situation you need for Marlon Mack. He had 139 rushing yards last week. He didn't have 139 rushing yards total the previous 3 weeks. So this is an issue for me. Just like Adam said, if this game somewhat stays close, they're not just going to ride Marlon Mack. No, Marlon Mack last week, 27 carries. If he gets that type of usage, any running back that gets that type of usage should theoretically pay off. But the previous few weeks before that, 14 touches, 9 touches, 17 touches. That's where he lives, is in the 12 to 17 touch range. At 5,500, that's okay, especially considering that he does have touchdown upside in this offense. But I think he's more dangerous than people are letting on.
I mean, my point is he's a perfect tournament play. He's been under 2% owned 8 weeks this year, and he's gone over 29.9 points 3 times. He's gotten that 100-yard bonus and hits those touchdowns. I just think he's in that price range that he'll be sub 5% owned for sure, and certainly could be a winner for you. The highest equity plays to me are Hilton and Saquon Barkley. Also like the Ingram call, but his price has come up. Any final thoughts here, Adam?
No, I mean, I think we hit on most of the guys in this game.
Okay, let's go to the Jaguars and Dolphins, which looks like a real brutal game. Adam, the one thing that you and I were both on big time last week was Fournette, which was very disappointing in tournaments.
Yeah, I go to the solo pod. I spent like 10 minutes talking about the Fournette situation and even launched a business idea, which I hope somebody capitalizes on. I don't know what the Jaguars are going to do. If we implement my business idea, maybe we would have a chance to know, but I mean, they seem to be in full-on evaluation mode, and Leonard Fournette seems okay with it. He was like, yeah, the plan was for me not to play in the second half. They're going to look at Dave Williams, so I don't know if they're going to do that again or not. So to me, that's going to make Fournette like 1% owned or something because nobody knows. But if Fournette does end up touching the ball 25 times like he should, and the dude's just absolutely going to smash this Miami defense. So I don't know, man. It is what it is. Also, D.D. Westbrook's role continues to be just huge. I mean, he's seeing like 25% target share. And yeah, Cody Kessler is a threat to only throw the ball 20 times or whatever. But really, I think 30 attempts is a better projection. So I still think D.D. is okay. And then the injury news, Frank Gore is done for the year. A lot of controversy over whether they'll install Kenyon Drake into a feature back role. I don't think they'll do that. I think Kenyon Drake sees a little bit more work, but they don't want to change Kenyon Drake's role. They think he's a third down back and that's it. So that leaves Kalen Ballage to play the Frank Gore role. And honestly, against the Jaguars defense, I'm not that excited about it, regardless, Al.
Is it Ballage or Ballage?
Good question. I have no clue.
I've heard both this week. You think it's Ballage?
I don't have conviction, though, but I wanted to.
I used to love going to the Bellagio. It was one of my favorite places to weekend before I had kids. But at this point, are they going to just give Kenyon Drake the ball? Probably not. He's got single-digit carries in 6 straight games. Do we really think he's just going to feed him? They've got Frank Gore, who's averaged about 14 touches per game. Looks like Ballage is just going to slide right into that role. And yes, you do have to pronounce his name like that from now on. You have to go with the country club, Chet voice and play Kalen Ballage at 3,700.
Probably the funniest moment from my weekend, and not to dive too much into what was going on, but Ballage had that long touchdown run, and I was like, "Oh, who's that?" I thought it might be Ballage, and it was. I have him in 40% of my best balls, which I know is unrelated to DraftKings, but Ballage has been a total corpse on the bench, and that was the highlight of my weekend. So
12 carries for 123 and a touchdown.
Hopefully he can do it again. Not optimistic. Definitely not going to have any DFS exposure, but glad to see him finally come out. We have a couple other guys that we'll get to that are kind of in that same mold, these backup running backs that have upside that are relevant, especially in this next game. So unless you have any other thoughts here, Adam, we can pivot to the Rams and Cardinals.
Let's do it.
All right, Rams and Cardinals. This is the one. Yeah. Backup running backs could be in play. Todd Gurley is a big piece of news, and it's been really weird monitoring this. McVay said he expects him to play on Wednesday. We're recording this here on Thursday. He doesn't practice. Pretty tough to kind of figure out what's going to happen there.
Yeah, I mean, the Rams are highly motivated, right? I mean, they need a bye, I think, and the Bears are right on their tail. I mean, the Bears are 1 game back, so they need this game, and I think Todd Gurley ends up playing in this game, but he does have knee inflammation, which is scary, man. So I think he's just resting in practice and he's trying to get the knee right. But man, I mean, to pay $9,200 for a guy who we know comes into a game with a knee issue is somewhat concerning, particularly when, I mean, if the Rams can get right, I mean, I know they're on the road, but if the Rams can find a way to get right, I mean, they should just absolutely smash this Cardinals team. So it's interesting, man. I think if Gurley was healthy, he'd be an absolutely phenomenal play against the Cardinals team, which faces the most rush attempts in the league. They did sign CJ Anderson, but I think that's more because Malcolm Brown and Justin Davis are hurt and because they don't trust John Kelly. So we'll see. I don't know. Maybe we should stay there for a second, Al. Do you think that, how confident do you feel rostering Gurley with what we know now? He's going to play, but his knee is an issue.
I mean, you're the CEO of Team Preseason, so like John Kelly.
Yeah, no.
One of your underlings. You say they don't trust him, but Kelly. But like this dude showed some flashes in preseason. If Gurley plays like a quarter, right?
But
if John Kelly sees 12 to 15 touches,
why would they only play him a quarter though? I feel like he either plays or he doesn't. You know.
You think it's all in or nothing?
Yeah. Why would
you want to know why? They play in the same city as Melvin Gordon and the Chargers.
So if it's a blowout, I agree. But like if it's within like 2 touchdowns, do you think they pull
Melvin
him?
Gordon game was a blowout too?
Yeah,
they were up like 30 at halftime.
Yeah, I don't think McVay would be that dumb.
I don't know, man. Did you watch last week's game?
Wait, we're down on McVay now. Hold on.
No, I'm just saying, just like anybody else, he's human and he has the capability of being stupid in a moment.
Yeah, I think McVay would be likely to pull Gurley if they get up by 21 plus. I think other than that, my gut is that he stays in there, but I don't know. Like I said, it's not definite.
Yeah, like I could see, okay. Rationally and reasonably, you could come into this week and say, okay, let's dress Gurley, let's test him out in pregame, let's run him, but let's be mindful of the fact that we need to take some of the weight off of him and maybe give him 40% or 50% of the work that he typically sees in a usual game because we need him more in January than we need him in December. That would be the reasonable and rational view towards looking at this game going into it. But when you get into a game situation as a coach, You don't think that way. You're just like, my guy's out on the field and we look good and let's just ride the guys that are out there instead of sticking to a preset snap plan. Now, they do have C.J. Anderson. Maybe he sees 3 or 5 touches. Maybe he's only there for emergencies. Can you go further into the they don't trust John Kelly role? Or it's just what you've seen?
Yeah.
Is there something behind that I'm missing?
This is
CJ
what
Anderson
I read.
Signing.
What'd you say, Peter?
I said the C.J. Anderson signing is a big thing to me.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have 3 running backs on the roster at least, I think. But yeah, I mean, I read this from Rams beat reporters that like John Kelly is just like not someone that they trust. So we'll see if that bears out.
But not on his running ability. It has to be pass pro, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure.
He's a rookie.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. But like Brown's injury opens the door. Like
and
Brown,
Justin
everybody
Davis,
in preseason thought that Kelly was going to be the guy because of how he looked in preseason. And then Brown got hurt, and now Kelly's in that backup spot. I'm not saying that we need to play him. I'm speaking more towards we just stream running backs against Arizona, right? Because they just give up so many yards and touchdowns and everything to running backs. I'd be shocked if Gurley gets more than 18 touches in this game. Okay. I'd be shocked if they roll him out there for that much.
Yeah. See, I kind of think if he plays and it's close, he will get more than that. But I don't know, man. It's a question for sure.
Yeah, and that lends itself to me not wanting to pay $9,200 to find out.
Yeah, it's very
definitely
expensive.
not in cash. I mean, maybe in tournaments, but I think it also holds his number down in tournaments.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about a couple of plays that we can pivot off of. We're not going to play Gurley, or if you do play Gurley, maybe you load up a Rams stack. I think Robert Woods is really intriguing this week. He's going to be in the slot a ton and hopefully avoid a lot of Patrick Peterson, who will not go into the slot. I think he makes a lot of sense. Reynolds is starting to play well. Had a great catch, was almost a touchdown, ruled a touchdown, and then Todd Gurley ended up coming in to get that score. But both those guys are interesting. Jared Goff stacks are not as intriguing to me, just given we don't think Arizona is going to put up as many points. And the home road splits for Goff are just getting ginormous at this point. So I think Woods is probably my favorite play outside of the running back situation for the Rams, Adam. And then on the Cardinals side, struggling to want to play anyone, but I guess you could go to David Johnson.
Every week it's like, I guess we can just put David Johnson in there for his 10 fantasy points. That'll be fun.
He had 19.
Let's go Chase Edmonds. Root for all the backers.
Peter has all these dust balls on his best ball bench.
They're on I picked 3 guys in the 18th pick over and over again. It was Balaj, Kelly, and Edmonds. Got some leverage on those 3.
Wow, okay. Well, those guys aren't drawing dead considering what you could have gotten in the 18th round.
Especially with everyone falling off right now. Lots of injuries. So
yeah, I think Josh Reynolds will be pretty popular. I mean, you click on his game log, you saw 12 targets last week and he's 4,600 and he plays in the Rams offense and he's not going to see Patrick Peterson. You know what I mean? So yeah, I have no problem with Josh Reynolds whatsoever. He might see some Patrick Peterson, who has not always shadowed this year. If he does shadow, he would likely be on Brandon Cooks. But yeah, I mean, the highest equity for sure is Robert Woods, who continues to see 8, 9, 10 targets, operates out of the slot, and is just a good player.
The Rams defense is 3,200 and playing against it's the giving season, and the Arizona Cardinals offense has been very giving to opposing DSTs.
Very true. All right, let's talk Bears at 49ers. What are the news notes here, Adam?
I don't have a lot from an injury perspective. You know, Matt Breida is limited as usual. I'm not sure we're going to want to use running backs against Chicago regardless. From an overall perspective, I would note San Francisco, despite being dead, continues to just play really hard and really well. I've just been impressed with what they've been able to do, particularly with Nick Mullins. I mean, he looks like a legit NFL quarterback when we all thought he was just going to be just a total disaster. This team has played well. And to that end, Dante Pettis' price is adjusted for the Bears. But with Marquise Goodwin being phased out, with Pierre Garçon out, I mean, Dante Pettis is the clear cut number 1 wideout for Nick Mullins. And Dante Pettis is someone the 49ers traded up for. They want to see him as their number 1 wideout, and they're getting to see it. So there's a bunch of guys, you know, in the mid 4Ks here that are, you can make a case, are number 1 receivers for their team. And Dante Pettis is certainly one of them. Al, matchup is far from ideal, but he's at home. If you're going to beat the Bears in a way, it's far easier perimeter than it is up the middle.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think his price is really adjusted at all. It's been 4,400 the last 2 weeks. It's 4,300 this week. Yeah, it's up from the high 3s from where it was like in week 13 and 12. But realistically speaking, as you just said, they're phasing everybody out. because they know what they have there, and they've sustained so many injuries to Garoppolo and to McKinnon, and then Goodwin is somebody who's been injury prone in the past. So why roll him out there? Dante Pettis with over 90% of snaps and seeing consistent targets, 5, 7, 7, 7 the last 3 weeks. Yes, could he be less efficient this week? Of course. But are you going to find other wide receivers in the low 4Ks outside of Robbie Anderson, who's in the mid 4Ks, obviously, who have that much run and are going to get that many looks and are going to run that many routes? I don't think you can. And as we've said numerous times in this podcast, does kind of look like a team jam him in week, which leaves Dante Pettis as a prime candidate to allow you to afford the guys you really want. He's not the guy you need, but he lets you get the guys you need.
George Kittle, been ridiculous. Elite athleticism. I think he's intriguing, even against this Bears defense. And then on the other side, Adam, Trubisky's been a tournament winner all year. I mean, really has had some monster games throughout this season. It's a good spot against the 49ers. We'll see. I mean, I think Jordan Howard will struggle a little bit against this 49ers front seven, which has actually been good against the run. Maybe it's a Tariq Cohen game. Any interest in Trubisky or these pass catchers?
Yeah, I've struggled with Trubisky this year. I know people have won a lot of money with Trubisky this year. I've struggled to get on him, but his rushing upside is higher than I think people realize. And I guess it's just hard for me to pinpoint who to stack him with if I was making a team. My lean is always to Cohen. I wish it was Burton, but Burton's just not involved enough. I wish it was Allen Robinson, but he's rarely involved enough. So, yeah, I don't know.
People won $1 million with a Trubisky stack last week.
Yep.
Al, any interest?
In Trubisky, I mean, we've seen what his upside is. He's at least playing not in a winter weather wonderland sort of game. And in San Francisco, yeah, their front seven's been good, but they're susceptible to giving up points. I don't mind Trubisky at all here. His rushing gives him an opportunity for a ceiling. I don't know that I would want to stack him with a pass catcher, most likely. He is it's a spread it out sort of offense. I think that Cohen is fine to stack with
Trubisky.
Him. Yeah, naked Trubisky or Trubisky with Cohen as your third back. I don't mind.
All right. Well, let's go to the late hammer, which is definitely the best game, real life and for fantasy, I believe. Some holes we can poke in it, but Steelers at Saints here, Adam. High total, late hammer. Steelers were in the same spot last week, and it was a disappointing finish. Mm-hmm. What are the news and notes, and how are you getting exposure to this game?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think two defenses I probably have more respect for than most people. I mean, the Saints defense has been balling lately, and I think Pittsburgh, when they're playing well, they're so good getting after the quarterback, and they're so good against the run. And they have Joe Hayden, who I think is still awesome, and I know a lot of people don't. But so yeah, I think two defenses that are better than most people realize. I think the total is so high just because both the offenses have the potential to be so efficient. From an injury perspective, James Conner sounds bad. I mean, he went out and tried to practice on Wednesday, said it just still didn't feel right. So I think Jalen Samuels will once again be the feature back. He's now up to 6,700. I mean, we had him at 3,700 2 weeks ago. Now he's 6,700. That's a lot to pay against this New Orleans front, but we know Jalen Samuels' ability as a pass catcher always puts him in play. The spot to attack both these defenses has been in the slot. I mean, Michael Thomas does not go into the slot nearly as much as he has in the past, but when he's in there, they throw it to him a lot. We saw Julian Edelman, we saw Keenan Allen, we saw Seth Roberts, we saw Emmanuel Sanders all light up this Steelers slot defense over the last month. And then on the other side of the ball, PJ Williams is PFF's like number 111 cornerback out of 128, and that's where Juju Smith-Schuster will land. I mean, Antonio Brown is just like 7 targets each of the last 2 games, failed to top 50 yards. Antonio Brown could certainly have a ceiling game at any time. His red zone role is awesome, but I would feel a little bit better about Juju, particularly with the matchup here. And then kind of the guy it sets up for me, I already said what I thought about Pittsburgh's rush defense. I feel like it should be an Alvin Kamara kind of game plan. Like it should be home where it is home where the Saints are more pass heavy. The Steelers do have a good interior rush defense. Like this should be a Kamara game. The reason I've shied away from Kamara the last 4 or 5 weeks is because Mark Ingram has been so involved. Saints defense has been playing so much better, which has led to less pass attempts. I don't know, Al. Kamara's price now is down to 7,400, where I think it reflects kind of the things I talked about: Ingram role, improved defense, etc.
Yeah, I prefer Kamara to Ingram this week for all the reasons that you've said. We also know that the Saints are a much better offense at home. Breeze is a much better offensive fantasy quarterback at home. His home road splits continue to be a thing. And then that also drags the opposing team along with it. Whether that team is super talented or not, offensive teams on the other side get pulled along when they play against the Saints in New Orleans. Passing games averaging 297 yards against in the games that they've played there. I like Michael Thomas in this spot. The guy's been an absolute beast. And as Drew Brees' home road splits go, so do Michael Thomas's home road splits. 25.7 DraftKings points per game at home versus 17 points per game on the road. This looks like another spot where Michael Thomas can feast. Based on tournament builds, this is a game that you want to have exposure to. Vance McDonald, cheap enough for me to want to have exposure to. Juju Smith-Schuster, Michael Thomas should see massive volume in this game as well, and could see spots where they have tremendous matchups, and Alvin Kamara. If you can stack those guys in tournament lineups and fit them in, I think that you get that 20-minute hammer. You've got all the PMR, which means you have all the hope, and you're hoping for this game to be the shootout that it projects to be.
Yeah, this is the game that you just full on stack so that at 4:05 Eastern, you're still like, I still have a chance. 4:15, I still have this one. I have that one team with all the PMR left, though, so the day could be salvaged. I do think, we're looking at totals right now. Everything is way down, and it's been a really brutal, 3-week stretch here for anyone playing season long in the fantasy playoffs. DFS-wise scoring has been way down, and this week, this is the only game over 50 on the main slate. Next highest total as we're recording here on Thursday afternoon is 48.5 for this Dallas-Tampa Bay game. So really no shootouts expected outside of this game. And I think Adam made good points that both these defenses are playing better than people realize, but still in the Superdome, or still in the basically the course field of DFS, especially in the past with the Saints offense. Their defense is better, but I'll still take Drew Brees, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara stacks this week in tournaments. Running it back though, Adam, I think Juju's probably got the best matchup. Antonio Brown's ownership will be really low, and then you have Jalen Samuels priced up. Do you have a preference out of those three guys in terms of running it back?
Yeah, raw equity Juju, but I think Antonio Brown, he's never that low owned because people love to click Antonio Brown, so maybe it's bad in tournaments, but we'll see where the final projected ownership comes out. But I think Antonio Brown, if he comes in less than 10%, which I'm not sure that he will, but that would be pretty strong to me as well. Yeah, he'll see a lot of Marshawn Lattimore, but certainly beatable.
Jalen Samuels, I think, will be really low owned after that price increase, but there's a lot more opportunity cost at running back. Al, any final thoughts here on this game?
No, just play all the dudes.
The dudes.
Play all the dudes. All right, for the best segment of the year, it is holiday season. We're in a giving mood. We're going to go to conviction plays, Adam.
Yes, this is a conviction play that I have gone to repeatedly in my life, annually. Everybody's excited. It's Christmas. I am going to go with shrimp lo mein on Christmas Day as my conviction play. Merry Christmas to all. Enjoy the holiday. And we'll see you after Santa Claus comes down the chimney.
All right. In the giving spirit, I'm also going to not give a conviction play, considering I gave Gallup last week, and that costs all of the listeners that listen to me.
And I gave
money. So my conviction play is going to be going to the mountains and getting some skiing in for the holidays. Merry Christmas. Al, you want to give these guys anything real?
Yeah. The best conviction play on Christmas is tamales. We're having a tamalada at our house. We're going to spread that masa real nice and good. We're going to have the rich man tamales with a whole lot of chicken in there, a little bit of heat, a little bit of spice. Wrap those up, steam them up, and then we're going to all eat all the tamales in the afternoon. So for Adam, for Pete, for producer Luke, I hope you guys have a really good holiday this weekend. I hope that your lineups do really well, and I hope that you hashtag eat all the foods. So for everybody, and for Jerry, and for Adam's brand new car that's sitting behind him in his office, we'll see you guys later. Bye, everybody.
We are promoters at DraftKings and also avid fans. Our usernames are Adam Levitan, Al Smizzle, and CSU Ram 88. We may sometimes play on our personal accounts in the games that we offer advice on. Although we have expressed our personal view on the games and strategies in this podcast, they do not necessarily reflect the views of DraftKings, and we also may deploy different players and strategies than what we recommended in this podcast.